Gig Gab, the show for working musicians, episode 420 for Monday, March 11th, National Debunking Day 2024. Greetings, folks, and welcome to Gig Gab, the show by, for, and about working musicians here in Durham, New Hampshire. As usual, I am Dave Hamilton, and with me here to debunk things today is my friend and yours, Mr. Chris Breen. Chris, thanks for doing this with me.
Thanks so much for having me, and particularly on episode 420.
I know it's a special day for people in our circles. I think, and music circles in general. I think, yeah.
Yep, big night off.
Big night off. Well, it's also National Promposal Day, Chris. I was trying to decide which one to highlight. So,
wow.
Yeah. I did not prepare a promposal for you, so I'm sorry.
You know, you can just pause if you want.
That's true. We could pause. It'd be more fun if we workshopped it, though.
Yeah, you're right. This is not the kind of thing you want to improvise.
What would be the right song to include for a promposal for you? I'm not talking about the right song in general, but the right song for you. And that's really putting you on the spot.
That's really, really putting me on the spot. I think Wang Dang Doodle.
Okay. Yeah. That's one. I was, we were talking about Weather Report in the last episode. And so for some reason, Teen Town comes to mind as the right promposal song. I think if you just generally put Teen Town and Promposal out there without the context of it being just two old guys talking about it, it'd probably be really sort of weird and creepy. So,
Yeah. Well, I thought Wang Dang Doodle was definitely weird and creepy. So,
well, when you said Wang Dang, I thought you were going for the Ted Nugent song.
No. No. We're going way back for this one.
Thank goodness we avoided talking about the Ted Nugent song.
Exactly right.
That's right. Yeah. How have you been since you were last on the show several months ago? How things? Yeah.
Things are good. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm doing well.
Play any fun, interesting, notable gigs that are worth reporting here?
Yeah, I did play a one for the books.
Okay.
We were playing, this is my band, System 9, and this was a six-piece band. And we were playing at this, in a very large kind of auditorium for a retirement community, which you can tell by the hair, is increasingly our crowd.
Sure.
And it'd been quite a while since we'd been in such a big room. And so our guitar player loves being in a big room because they like that big room tone. And I don't know if guitar players you play with do this or not, but the volume started to creep up because, as you know, the louder you play, the better the tone.
What? A guitar player turned up?
I know. It is
I've never
shocking.
heard of such a thing.
It is shocking. Yeah, no, I know. And surprisingly, everybody else in the band started playing louder as well because otherwise...
That's what happens.
Because that's what happens. You can't be heard otherwise.
Yeah.
It turns out that the drummer had been trying to communicate to the guitar player that the volume where he was sitting was getting a little too loud. Because the guitar player had an open back cabinet, a Mesa Boogie, really bright sound.
It's true. The backs of those cabinets can often at least seem louder than the fronts of them, especially when, as a drummer, I've sat, behind or next to them, and it, especially if it's bouncing off the wall or whatever, it can add significantly to the stage wash, for sure.
Right. So after a while, the drummer got frustrated with this, and so needed to communicate to the guitar player that things were a little too loud. And as the guitar player's in front of him and isn't checking, behind him because he's
Sure.
engaging with the audience.
Yes, yes.
The drummer figured the best way to communicate his displeasure was to hurl a drumstick at the back of the guitar player just to get his attention.
Yes.
So he claims. This did not go over well.
What? I mean, as a drummer, I can't imagine a more efficient way of communicating, hey, buddy, I have something I'd like to discuss with you when you have a minute.
Right. And, because we're the kind of band that we just go bang, bang, bang through the tune. So there isn't like a lot of between song time to communicate.
Sure.
So he thought the best way was to lob the drumstick. Didn't go over well. And when the guitar player turned, he made the gesture of down, 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 which is a universal gesture for, oh, come on, turn it down.
Turn it down.
And did not turn it down. And so we were playing something, and the drummer thought, I'll give you a little taste of what this is like.
Uh-oh.
And so the drummer beats the hell out of the drums, really loud. And I have no idea what's going on until that happens.
Right.
And I turn around going,
I see. Okay.
What is going on here? And he's like pointing at the guitar player. The guitar player's going, "Argh." And we're still playing, while this interaction
Yes, of course. Yes. This reminds me of like the Eagles, devolving on stage in front of a crowd in the 70s. Yeah, the first time they devolved. Yeah.
So, well, generally we get along great, but this was like sort of out of nowhere kerfuffle.
It happens.
It happens.
It's, playing music, it's an emotional thing. Like we all lose our cool every now and then.
Right.
Yeah.
So at this point, the trumpet player clutches his ear and runs off stage.
Oh, wow.
And I'm looking around like, okay, let's finish this song. And I don't care what time it is. It's time for a break.
It's break time.
It's break
what
time.
It is.
What is going on here? Took the break. The drummer, generally a very cool-headed guy, immediately came up to me and apologized. He said, that was childish. I don't know why I did that. I'm really sorry. And he apologized to the guitar player. They went and had a little powwow.
Sure.
And I simply said, please use your words next time when you can. If necessary, don't be there for the first beat of the song. Go over and very politely whisper to the guitar player, please, could you turn it down a little bit?
Yeah, if you got to get his attention, get his attention.
Get his attention.
Yeah.
So, but where's the trumpet player in all this? He's in his car. He's clutching his ear. And he says, my ear hurts like it's never hurt before, and I have terrible vertigo. I think my eardrum burst.
Whoa.
And he couldn't play the rest of the gig because he couldn't put any back pressure on it.
Right?
It
Oh,
hurts.
my gosh. Oh, yeah, right.
Went home. Somebody drove him home because he couldn't drive because of the vertigo. Whoa. And he saw a doctor, and sure enough, his eardrum had ruptured. And you could imagine the politics of this within the group now, because, of course, the drummer feels horrible.
Yeah.
I mean, just horrible. And so when you're trying to, maneuver through this politically, it's like, well, it was too loud. But the reaction to it by throwing a drumstick was a bad idea. And then not turning it down and then beating the drum so hard that you burst somebody's eardrum.
This was an escalation of terrible proportions.
Terrible proportions. And I thought, I think we're old enough now that this kind of thing shouldn't happen. So eventually it all got worked out. Everybody talked to everybody else, and lots of apologies went around. And we sort of developed a way like, there's got to be some way for us to communicate that it's too loud without somebody getting annoyed.
Yeah.
And, we're big boys now, and I think we can manage that. But it was just one of those completely out of the blue, very strange things Because it turns out that he didn't know that one eardrum was quite delicate and thin.
Yeah,
and
right.
So this wouldn't happen to anybody else.
I was going to say, like, all of the things you said and the judgments that you sort of collectively as a band have come up with about this not being the right way to go and do this, and certainly not the most professional way on a gig, are correct. But, even flams on a snare drum, like, maybe you're going to hit 130 dB, and that's only a couple of feet from the drum. Like, it's going to be over 100 dB 5 feet away.
Right.
But, and that's bad, and all of those things. But for most people, in fact, for the vast majority of humans, that's not going to tear an eardrum, because it's a transient sound, right? It's not sustained. You're
Right.
hitting it, and it's loud, and then it stops, and
Right.
then it's loud, and then it stops. It's not sustained pressure on the eardrum. Again, not that it's good, but it is rare that this would happen.
Yeah, and the thing about it, I dearly love this trumpet player, but he is a delicate soul.
Yeah.
And he can sneeze and dislodge a rib. I mean, he's just that.
He's that guy.
He's that guy.
Yep.
Right. So if it's going to happen to anybody in the band, it will certainly be him. And anybody pretty much in the entire county, it's going to be that guy. So, we had to do a lot of healing over this, particularly the trumpet player.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's emotional healing going on, and then there's actual physical healing.
There's the actual physical healing.
Is he okay now? This was a couple of months ago, you said, right? So
yeah, this was a couple of months ago. He's still working on it. This was kind of a significant event.
Yeah.
And, you can imagine as a musician, you've just lost one of the key abilities to play your instrument. I mean, if you can't put back pressure as a horn player, you're done.
Yes.
So it would be like one of us losing a hand or something else. So
yeah, the closest I either broke or severely injured my wrist such that I had to take a couple of weeks off from playing. There was that.
Yeah.
That was not as bad as I got Bell's palsy. I don't know. You probably remember this. I had it for a Macworld All-Star Band gig. It was 15 years ago or something.
Yeah.
And I had a gig the night after it kicked in. Bell's palsy causes paralysis of the facial nerve on one side of your face. And that also means that your ear, like the muscles in my ear that would naturally protect my ear from loud sounds, could not work. And so, I wore earplugs and all this, but it was super weird, especially singing was like, oh man, like, so and that's nothing compared to what your trumpet player friend went through.
Yeah. And this is all kind of a downer. I'm sorry that
it's fascinating. Like, it's like,
well, but it leads to the larger point that, I am of an age, and I hang out with a lot of musicians, and you can see that through injury or aging out or something, that they lose the ability to perform either up to the standard that they used to, or at all. I used to have this piano gig years and years and years ago, and this woman would come in, and she really liked the way I played, and she finally told me that she used to play, and she was probably in her 80s at that point. And she used to play, and she played professionally. She was a concert pianist, and then she had a stroke, and she couldn't play anymore, ever.
Yeah.
And you could just see it was wrenching for her still. She still enjoyed seeing other people play. But when you lose that ability, that something is so foundational to you, to your emotional health, that you can't do it anymore, that's just a huge loss. You see vocalists go through it. Keith Jarrett, for example, as a pianist, he can't play because one of his hands doesn't work the way it used to.
And there's the story of Keith Emerson too, who chose to take his life because he couldn't play anymore, and he couldn't imagine continuing on without that, which awful.
Yeah, so to maybe bring it back down a little bit from the downer
the
part
really
of it,
dark stuff,
the really dark stuff. But it has become an increasingly consideration for me as I age, and the people around me who are less physically capable of doing what they used to do. And some of that is for vocalists as well. I mean, my voice is not what it used to be because of some medical issues. And yet, how can you still do this? And what it requires is adapting and then kind of owning what you have now. So if I can't play as quickly as I used to, I have changed the way I play. If I can't sing the way I used to, I change that.
Yeah.
And in professional life, you sort of see people who chose to go one way or the other. I saw a famous, very, 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 very famous name band. One of the vocalists had lost the top octave of their range.
Yep.
So the puzzle was, how do you address that? Do you just lower the keys of everything and do the best you can? Or, and that was this person's choice, you just change all the melodies.
Okay.
Which is, when I heard this performance, I thought, that's an interesting choice. Because clearly the changing keys thing wasn't going to work, because I guess the voice was broken enough that you couldn't get there.
Yeah.
So instead, you just sort of pretend it didn't happen. And here are records that have sold by the millions, and everybody in the room is singing along with it, except the primary vocalist,
except that guy
who's got a different melody to it. And so
that's a tough thing for a cover band too, but especially for an original band, like there is that nostalgia element for a lot of bands,
right?
That's in fact for many bands that have been around for a number of years, where these issues would just naturally sort of take their course. The nostalgia is the primary reason people are coming to see the band. And if they can't hear the melodies that they knew when they were kids, when the band members were kids, it changes it a little. I remember the band Boston, where Brad Delp was the lead singer, and after I forget what the album was, but after Third Stage, they took a number of years off, and then they came back and they toured around, and they hired Fran Cosmo to be the co-lead vocalist along with Brad Delp. And that seemed preposterous to me. I mean, here you have Brad freaking Delp. Why would you hire somebody else? And Brad made it clear during the show. He's like, listen, all those high notes that you're hearing, that's him. Like, I'm singing the parts that make it sound like it's me. But when we need those high harmonies that used to be me, they can't be me anymore, because I used to be that guy, but I'm not that guy. But Fran is. And so they figured it out in a way that worked. And one size does not fit all. Like, you need a formula that fits your music, the way that works for you as the artist, and also for your crowd, for your audience. Yeah.
Yeah. I saw Elton John a couple of years ago on the never-ending farewell tour that just hasn't. I think
did it finally end? I think it might have.
I'm not sure. He may have another residency coming up.
Yeah.
But he talks very openly about his voice has changed.
Oh yeah.
He doesn't have that high range that he used to have.
Right.
But his low range is awesome. I mean, he's really a nice full voice now. But you look at the band, and when he has to do songs like Rocket Man or something, it just has that big high note in it. He's got another person doing that stuff. And they're not trying to hide it. It's not like somebody's behind the curtain with a mic.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But you see how people are starting to accommodate that. Whereas you have somebody like Paul McCartney, who does everything in the same key as he ever did it, does a 3-hour show, does Helter Skelter 3 tunes before the end.
I know.
And the guy nails it, because he's taking good care of himself, just like Jagger, where he can still deliver at that age.
His voice is, it's starting to like kind of taper a little now. But, 5-10 years ago, his voice was better than it had been for the previous 15 years. I think he stopped smoking weed. Speaking of episode 420, like, he said, I realized I wanted to preserve this. I mean, this was important to him. And so he started doing the things at least the obvious things. But even still, the fact that he could deliver those songs that way, even now, he's making everybody else look bad. Like,
oh, absolutely,
he ruined it for the rest of them.
He absolutely has, and because you see some of these older artists now who are kind of checking out. Like Paul Simon's pretty much done. Van Morrison done.
Yeah.
And who can blame them? These guys are in their 80s now.
It's all done. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I go to bed at 10 and they're just getting started, So, yeah. But it's interesting just, broadly to see what people are doing to accommodate getting older and still wanting to create music, not necessarily just for a living, but because it's their passion and it still matters so much to them.
It still matters. Well, and there's things you can do, like I never fully recovered from my Bell's palsy. The right side of my face is still not quite as functional as it was or as the left side still is. And it's fine. Like, this is not something I complain about. There could be far worse things going on with my health than this, 5% reduction.
Yeah.
But I had to relearn how to sing, which is to say I had to learn how to sing after this because I had never really done anything other than, hey, give me a microphone, I'll sing the harmonies.
Yeah.
And you learn on stage, and like there's something to be said for that. And it's functional, it works. But I had to relearn how to use my throat muscles because one side works differently than the other.
Yeah.
And that's just a fact. And it's like, okay, well, what now what? So I took some singing lessons and, physical therapy initially, but then singing lessons and being cognizant of it. And I mean, I think it quite frankly made me a better singer than I would have been otherwise, because I don't know what other catalyst would have made me stop and do that. Right. But for all of us, that's an okay thing to do is, here's the things that you're doing, even if it's something that you have had lessons for. There's nothing that says you can't go to a teacher after playing for several decades and say, hey, either I want to learn something new because I want to learn something new, or I need to relearn how to do a thing and I want a partner in crime on this particular mission. And, and approaching it that way makes it easy. You don't necessarily need to find someone that is just objectively a better player than you. You need to find someone that's a good teacher.
Yeah.
And that's all you need, and that person can help you get better than they are. If in fact that's capable, if you are capable of that, not that, but I would say, get your ego out of the way, folks. If there's something you want to learn, having a teacher is great.
Yeah.
It can be really helpful. And especially if it's something that, like for me, singing for me, that I never actually learned how to do. It's like, well, no better time than the present.
Well, you do pretty well considering.
Well, I do now. I mean, and I did okay before that. I've always had a decent sense of pitch, and thank you for saying that. But learning how to use your instrument is a different thing than knowing that your instrument's out of tune.
Right.
And for singing harmonies, where it's kind of buried, maybe it doesn't matter as much. But still, better to sound good. I want to circle back to something, though. You said that you had, as a band, figured out it in sort of the aftermath of this incident you described. You had figured out that you needed to come up with a way of getting one another's attention. And I want to go through this a little bit because it's sort of productive and positive after all the doom and gloom that we just went through. But also, I think this is something that every band needs to know how to do. And if it hasn't happened organically, maybe take a minute at your next rehearsal and be explicit about it and figure it out.
Yeah.
Because you're right, your band, where you're playing, song into song into song into song, that's good. It keeps the flow going and all of those things. However, if someone has an issue, either their own issue with their own equipment or, needs to communicate. So how have you figured, how has your band solved this problem?
Well, I'm not sure it's solved because we haven't tested it yet.
Okay, well, that's fair. All right. Well,
but I think in the case of volume, a lot of times it's around the guitar player. And, we all try to be understanding. It usually
is. Yeah.
I mean, we're trying to be understanding about it that, tone does matter. And and there's something about volume, that matters to the way this thing sounds.
Yep. Well, especially if it's an analog system with like tubes in it,
Yeah.
You want the more at some point you want the tubes to soak up a little bit so that
Yeah.
you get that rounder tone. I get it.
Yeah. So I think the first thing we talked about is one, this isn't personal. If you're talking to somebody about volume, we're not saying you're ugly. We're not saying you don't play well.
Right.
All we're saying is it's throwing the band out of balance. So
objectively, this needs to, yes,
Right.
exactly. Yep.
So either all of us come up, which is what we have been doing, and then it sounds bad and it's impolite to your audience, right? Because you're killing them. Or don't take it personally. If I signal to the bass player who's next to me, who's next to the guitar player, just say, could you tell so-and-so
Yep.
just to turn it down a little bit? Or if I'm looking over there and I'm calling a tune, I'll just do this.
Yep.
And it's not an affront to anything.
No, this is a move of efficiency.
Right.
And everyone needs to understand that, right? Like,
Right.
And the same thing can happen if a guitar player or singer like either turns to me or doesn't even turn to me in the middle of a tune and gives that kind of slow down signal or speed up signal. It's like, fix it.
Yeah.
Talk about it later if you want.
Right.
But that person is the singer. They need it where they need it, whatever. Give it to them. Talk about it later. Fix, figure out the root of the problem later. Now put the Band-Aid on, move on. Yep.
Yeah. And ultimately, it's about trusting each other, right?
Totally.
So if somebody makes that gesture at you and you think, no, I'm good. If you trust that person, you're going to say, I think I'm good, but somebody else doesn't think so. And
Yep.
so for the good of the band, I'll do what they say. And if it sucks afterwards, I can say, well, you were wrong. But when it comes to volume, it's hardly ever the case that when somebody says it's too loud, they're wrong.
That's true. Yes, that might be the one objective truth of band dynamics. If someone tells you you're too loud, they are almost certainly correct.
Almost certainly correct, unless it's the father of the bride and he's standing right in front of the band just waiting to tell you you're too loud, even before you've played a note. That person you can ignore. But if it's somebody in the band, then no, you don't get to ignore that.
Yeah.
And if you don't like it, try not to ignore that advice or be a jerk about it. It's not personal. We're all doing our best.
Well,
I mean, that was really where the discussion began, is like, look, none of this is personal. We're all trying to present the best performance we can. And if volume becomes an issue, it's an issue for all of us, not just
it reflects poorly on the whole band. It's not an individual thing. This is a team sport here. Yep.
Right. And in this case, rather than what I've done in the past, just kind of lay it on the law and say, you're too loud, turn it down. Once you're out of the heat of the moment, and instead in rehearsal, you can say, I don't know how to tell you to turn down without you reacting poorly to it. Help me. What can I say to you that will convince you that this is a good thing to do?
Right.
And once we approached it that way, he just said, well, honestly, I couldn't tell. Because I said, okay, there's such a thing as ear fatigue.
Yes.
Yep, you're right in front of it. And the way your speaker focuses, it's through your legs.
It's going past you.
Yeah,
Yes.
25 feet out in front of you.
Yep.
Fair. But if I do ask you politely, and not kind of throw a drumstick at you, which is not a good idea.
Yeah, bad idea.
Consider it and maybe a couple of notches down and see how that goes.
Yep. Yeah, in Fling, when Fling started gigging a lot, and this, probably going back 10, 12 years, we realized that we needed a way of making sure we all knew that it was okay to proceed into the next song without having a 5-man huddle between every song, right? Like that. And so we talked about this in rehearsal. after, a couple of gigs where it was like, oh, I needed time between, there was some issue, especially that gap between the first and the second song, especially if you don't have a true sound check. But even if you do, things can change.
Absolutely.
And sometimes you need that, like, whoa. And so what we talked about it, but then I really think it sort of organically happened that we would, if someone knew they needed something, they would get the attention, they would look at the set list, and whoever was the one that was going to count in the next song, they would get that person's attention before the current song ended.
Yep.
Like, I need a minute. And it's okay, great. Like, not great, but thank you. Now we know what to do here. I'm not just going to, go straight into the next song and leave you hanging out to dry. And that, I mean, there's times when you miss that signal or someone's not looking or they're, in a different headspace and that you miss it. But that, we found that worked really well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, when you said that your trumpet player left the stage, I thought it was because of just a tantrum. It turns out it was not, but
he was on the DL. Yeah.
Yeah. He had a real problem. But I have had two different bands, two band members, or one band member in each band. Both times the bass player. Normally the mild-mannered person.
Exactly. That's like the root mellow guy.
Correct. Both times, the only time I've had someone leave the stage in the middle of a song in like a tantrumy huff that really had no defensible grounds was the bass player. It happened in a band I played in Austin, and it happened in an old incarnation of Fling up here. And like, I understood after the fact, why they were pissed. Actually, it also happened at a theater gig once. Yeah, it's
During a show?
3 times. Also the bass player. 3 bass players. I know. It's
maybe you grow bass players differently on the east side of the Rockies, but every bass player I have ever played with is just kind of like
chill.
Very chill, and they just lay it down, and I'm cool. And they're walking, and they're doing the thing, and it's
And these guys would all be described as like fairly chill bass players, intellectual bass players. The thinking people, like that sort of thing. I mean, there's so maybe there's something to it where they just like. It stewed for the whole gig and they felt they were wronged, and then, the straw broke the camel's back kind of thing. I don't know.
Was there a common thread to these walkouts? Was it always kind of the same reason, or?
No, the one was we were playing like a charity event where it was mainly for parents, and then at the end they would bring their kids in. Like the kids would be in like babysitting, but not really babysitting. I mean, the kids were like teenagers, but it was like a charity auction, and then at the very end they would bring the kids in, and we always looked forward to it because it was really great to see like parents who had a few drinks or whatever and loosened up a little bit out there dancing with their kids, and it was really always a special moment. And this one night, they told us, "Oh yeah, no, we're not bringing the kids in." We'd done this gig like 5 years in a row or something, and this one night, whatever the way that they had orchestrated things, that was not going to be a part of it this year.
Okay.
And it's like, okay, well, it's not like we're just hired to play the music, Dave bang drum, band make sound, and it wasn't really our call to say, no, you therefore must bring the kids in. And so we were all sort of bummed, and it just got to our bass player, and he just left like during one song. It was like, what the hell is going on? Like, you can't, what? And so we ended the song, and then of course it was break time.
Break time.
Yes. And we went and found him. He was like, nah, this gig should just be over. And I was like, nope. I understand.
That's not your call, dude.
But we don't get to make that call. Right. So there was that. the bass player at I say it was a theater gig. It was in a theater. It was one of these madhouse shows, which was they were sort of a madhouse. We would learn about 30 songs for a one-off performance that it had a story thread. It was a series of things that went on like 2 years. It was a once a month series with characters that had this bizarre storyline, and it was all told through different songs. You know, I mean, there were some little moments of dialogue, but a lot of it was just the music. But that meant we had to learn 30 songs. We might only play a verse or a chorus of any given tune or whatever to sort of make the point and then move on with the story. But it doesn't really matter. If you have to learn the verse and the chorus, that's the whole song. Yeah. You just don't get to play it 3 times, you know? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so it was a lot, and it was always a pressure cooker kind of gig. Yeah. And there was one moment where it was the last song of I think the first act or something, and our bass player was unaware of what key we were in, and instead of sort of turning to maybe the keyboard player or something and saying, "Hey, what key are we in?" Yeah. He just, in a huff, put his bass down and stormed off stage. It's like, okay, you can't. Like, okay. And then the one down in Austin, that was the first time it happened. I don't know. I think I got thrown out of the band after that night because I let him have it after the gig. I was like, you can't do this. But it was he and our guitar player were the founders of this band. So, okay. But still, you can't do that. It doesn't matter who you are. And he stormed off the stage. We were playing at Steamboat in Austin. And I remember him storming off. I think he just didn't like the way a song was sounding or something. I don't know. There was some part, maybe we had brought in a female singer, and I don't think he liked her. It was an original band. I don't think he liked her, the way she sang or whatever. He didn't like the way the gig was going, so he just walked off the stage. It's like, also, no, you can't do that. Like, we can talk about it afterwards. Like, if there's a problem, we should definitely talk, but you don't.
Yeah, and generally that doesn't improve the performance. If you drop, your bass player and suddenly... somebody's going, well, who's kicking bass here? No keyboard player? Okay, you play the low strings on your guitar.
We were a 4-piece band, and that included the woman that was in the band that her only instrument was singing. Like, she didn't also,
So you're a power trio with a vocalist, and you lose the bass player.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's why I yelled at him at the end of the gig. I'm like, dude,
come on, man.
Yeah.
So how long was your drum solo?
I don't think I wound up doing it. I think we finished the song with just guitar and drums and vocals.
Really, that's all you need.
It turns out,
These temperamental bass players. Who needs
temperamental bass players? Yeah, what's up with that? That's not a thing. Why has this been a thread for me?
Could that be the, I don't know if you have episode titles for this.
We do have episode titles.
I think temperamental bass players.
Temperamental bass players. I usually use ChatGPT or DALL-E 3 to create the episode image.
Okay.
I'm really curious to see what it comes up with for that particular one. That's, yeah. And this is what I love about doing this show, because I had not thought about those incidents in I don't know how long. I certainly did not plan on having this conversation with anyone today, let alone you, while we recorded it. So thank you for this. It's great.
Well, we all have so many stories, and you never know what's going to trigger them. And then I completely forgot about this. But 15 years ago, this thing happened.
This thing happened. Yeah. I was reminded when you were talking about turning down, I was reminded of a story that I actually told about a month ago, because it happened at a gig about a month and a half ago, where we played, it was Monkey Fist, which is, and I'll go quickly so that the folks that have heard this story recently don't get too bored, but I'm curious as to your take on it, if you've seen anything like this. First time playing in a place, acoustic trio, met the owner, all good, get there, get set up. Middle of the first song, he comes over and tells us to turn it down. So I did. Of course, no problem. And with that band, it's really easy to turn it down because everything runs through the PA. There's nothing that's, And so I did. And then he was like, oh my gosh, it's amazing. And I know that I did turn it down, but I also know that I didn't turn it down so much that he should have been like that reaction. Mm-hmm. And then based on sort of the way the conversations evolved throughout the night, I started, and he loved us and he's going to have us back and all those things. Yep. I started to get the feeling that this was a litmus test for him. And not a bad one. Mm-hmm. Right? Because this is, can I work with you?
Right.
Not, are you going to play too loud? Like, no matter what, if I tell you to turn down, what's going to happen? Are you going to be a jerk about it? Are you know? And so I share this again, A, because you reminded me of it, but B, have you ever been in a scenario where you felt like you were being tested for, for your ability to, play well with others?
Yes.
I think we always are, but like an intentional test of that.
Right, not in that way, although I think that's brilliant. You know, first song, turn down. If the bass player walks off the stage, you know who you're dealing with, and like, okay, we're done. Yeah, you're out.
And because it is, like, he knew immediately who he was dealing with in a split second there. And it was like, man, that's so smart.
Yeah, really smart.
And once I figured it out, I was like, oh, I can play into this. Like, I can tell the story about, I played in a band with a guy who was not like this, and I had to leave the band to tell him I'm on your side, like. Yeah. Of course.
Yeah, I've always wanted to have like a big knob in front of the band that just says volume, so when somebody is, doing, it's too loud, they could just come up and turn this knob, which does nothing, and then feel like, oh, okay, good, that's better.
Yes.
Because they've had the chance to, because whatever, right? Anybody in the audience, and I'll go back to the father of the bride because I've had a few problems with them.
Sure.
Come up and say, you're in the middle of a song, you're singing, and they're shouting in your ear, turn it down, like you have that one knob. Like, yeah, no problem.
Yep.
Whoop, there. It's all
magic.
done. It's all magic, and we're going to do it in the middle of the song while I'm singing.
And playing an instrument.
And playing an instrument at the same time, and I'm looking around like I'm trying to, I can't, I'm not an owl. I can't turn my head around to talk to the drummer. So,
No,
but I have been in situations where I've been told to turn down before I played a note. And I think this probably happened to a lot of people. We were at this, I think it was a winery, somebody's wedding, and the guy who runs the place or who's running the event came up to us, and first of all, they just see your equipment and they go, oh, you're going to be too loud. And like, give us a chance.
Yep.
And he said, listen, I really need you guys to turn down. And I went, wait till we plug in the power and we've done something and you can let us know. And he said, yeah, because, we've just, music is in danger here, and you've just got to, what if you just don't? And it was just like this long list of things we were not allowed to do. In the meantime, we've already made an arrangement with the bride and groom who are paying us, and this is their first song, and this is what they want. And the guy wanted to see our set list and showed it to me. He goes, oh, no, you can't play any of that. Like, well, this is what the bride and groom have asked us for. This is why they're paying us. This is why they hired us.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry you have an issue with noise here. Maybe you should never have live music here.
Yeah, you shouldn't have taken this gig.
Right. Except, it's part of your income. I get it.
Oh, right. Yes.
So, we tried to work with him as much as we could. And then I think at one point the bride just came up and said, I can't hear you guys. We want to have fun, and you're a total downer. And so, of course, I ratted out the guy who ran the thing, and I said, look,
of course.
I want to do exactly what you want because you're paying me, and I like you, and I hate him.
Yeah, right.
So I sicked the bride on him, and so she went over there and chewed him out, and then he left, basically. And, and we got to finish the gig. But it's another one of those things where you're playing at some kind of venue that really doesn't want live music.
Right.
But they need it for their income. And so, they just make musicians' lives miserable. I'm very conscious about volume. I care a lot about it, and I try to accommodate people. But when it's clear that they don't want you there at all,
Yeah.
except to be seen, and I've had that gig where somebody said, just don't play. We just want to see you. Because
Wow.
like you're a vase of flowers or something. And because this is somebody who told us to turn down like 4 times, and we're down at like nothing.
Yeah, nothing. Yeah.
And the loudest thing is the sax player, and he's turned to the wall to keep from projecting.
To help mute his sound, sure.
Yeah, and finally she just had one of those heart-to-hearts with us. She goes, we don't really want to hear you. This is the kind of event where, it looks good for us to have music here. And so we just want to see you.
We had a gig when I was in the blues rock trio, right? This is down in Austin, and it was half originals and half just like blues and blues rock standards, some Stevie Ray, some Clapton, that kind of vibe. So we could be loud. I mean,
That's what it is.
Our guitar player would bring both a Marshall half stack and a Fender Twin. He wouldn't play them both at the same time.
Yeah.
I actually built him a AB switch box that he could switch back and forth between. Yeah. But we get there, and they had hired us. We'd sent them our album. They liked it. They're like, yes, we want. Okay, great. They greeted us. They were so nice to us when we get there. We load in, unpack everything, set it all up, and Murray, our guitar player, plugs in his amp, turns it on, and hits like just a chord just to, make some noise out of his amp. And the woman running the place rushes up to the stage and it's like, oh my God, I am so sorry. We had no idea that it was going to be this loud. And I think Murray said, well, you ain't seen nothing yet. He was great with people. So whatever he said was it was not off-putting to this woman, but that's basically what he said. Like this is nothing, know. And she's like, I know, we just, we played your album in here on the speakers and your CD or whatever, and we really liked it, and we thought it would be great to have you play, but we can't have that kind of volume in here. And she was nice about it. She's like, here's your money. I'm sorry to ask you to pack your stuff back up. We would love to feed you dinner. It was all very, very, like she understood that it was her mistake, as opposed to some of these places where that's not the case. In fact, that's the only time that has ever happened, which is why it's notable. But it was like, okay, well, and it was like an hour and a half from Austin where we lived, and so we had driven together and got we it was a trio, so we could all go in the same car, and so it was fine. It was, we liked hanging out with each other. It was fine.
And you got paid.
Absolutely, yeah. It was. There was no issue other than we didn't get to play. Like at least Murray got to play a chord. The rest of us played literally nothing.
It's too bad he didn't set up first, and you still had your drums still in the cases, and
exactly. Yeah, hey Murray, go in, set your amp up while we're here in the car, and just see what happens.
Yeah, see what happens in here because I'm getting a sense. This
we didn't, and that was the thing. It shocked us all. We didn't have a sense. Like it wasn't like, oh, I can't even imagine why did they have us here. Like we'd played rooms that size before.
Sure.
It was going to be fine from our standpoint. We didn't walk in thinking, how do we make this room work? It's like, oh yeah, it's going to be totally fine. And it was like, not for them. Okay, no problem. Yep.
Yeah, and there are those rooms you walk into, right, where it's not going to be fine.
Right.
Because it's got 40-foot ceilings, marble surfaces, hard surfaces everywhere.
Yeah.
And you whisper, in one corner of the room and you can hear it in the other.
Yes.
And you just know this is not going to work.
This is not it.
You still have to do it, right? But you're playing it like one, and it's still too much. And
I have found, I will say it's been a long time since I've found this to have worked, and I think it's technology that has gotten better in terms, like sound technology has gotten better. But it used to be that when the first time someone, a manager or whatever, would come up and say, hey, you're too loud, turn it down. The first time what I would do is go over and turn the vocals up about 3 dB. Because what I found was they were saying the mix is bad, but they didn't know how to say that. So what they were saying is it's too loud, but what they meant was the instruments are too loud compared to the vocals, right? And so there was a long stretch where that was the solution. And then we started using like digital mixers and really, I also learned a lot more about sound and learned how to tune rooms better. And then it got to a point where it was like, no, I know that the blend is good. So if they've said it's too loud, it's actually too loud. We just have to turn down. But we didn't have real-time analyzers and compression on every channel and all the beautiful things that we get to have now. So I had a list of things, but I don't
think we've talked about a single one of them. And
I don't think we have.
That's fine.
No, it's totally fine. It's totally fine. So other than duct tape, which we spent some time with before we got to record here because we needed it. Otherwise, Chris would have been lighting himself up with his microphone's light as like an effect every time he talked. That's right. Yeah, 420. Other than duct tape, what do you keep? I have a box. Listeners know I call it my just in case, and it's all the stuff that I think I might need at a gig. There is one thing in that box that I have only ever used once, and it was on a Macworld All-Star Band gig. It is a power break that takes a powered speaker input. So like if you've got an amplifier running to a speaker, this was built for, if it's running to a monitor wedge, I want to use my in-ears. It takes a powered signal, you plug it into this, and on the other end is a headphone output. I was so scared the first time and the only time I used this because if it didn't work, I was going to blow my eardrums out. And it was at Broadway Studios where I did it. Yeah. The first time we played there, their sound system was all just, passive wedges. So I had this thing. I still keep it with me. It's been with me at every gig before that and every gig since that. But I've literally used it one time. Yeah. And I was glad to have it. Like it was worth the $30 that I spent on it to be able to just be like, I can solve this problem, no problem. Yeah. But I'm curious, like, what things do you have things that you bring to a gig that you actually find valuable? Because the thing that I brought, like that's I probably shouldn't be bringing that around anymore.
I used to carry, actually I still do because it's all, I've got my big cord bag and it's got 30 years worth of stuff in it.
Right. Right.
So I used to carry and still do apparently a bunch of adapters because you'd go to a club and like an XLR turnaround and an XLR to 1/4 inch. Because every once in a while I change gear at different times. And sometimes I have to go direct and sometimes it's out of an amp and depending on the club you're in or the venue you're in, they may not have the adapter you need. And so I would just lay them out on the ground and say, okay, I think if we use this and this and this and this.
Stringing them together is when the power comes. That's
exactly.
Right. Yes.
And then you finally get to where you need to go and they finally get the input that they want or the output.
Yep.
And, there's some of them that I haven't touched in 10 years. Because I haven't needed to, but I still keep them because you never know when that's going to happen. And I think a lot of people do that. We tend to carry more adapters now in our sound rig.
Yes.
Because, there we have all the real stuff. But when it comes to my particular setup, I have adapters that are more likely to be used with my stuff.
Especially on a one-off gig where you're not doing your own sound. That's
exactly. Yeah.
Yep. No, I keep those things with me. I keep XLR, both kinds to 1/4 inch.
Yep.
I keep an XLR turnaround adapter. I also keep a couple of right angle XLR adapters. As a drummer, when someone's trying to fit their big monster microphone in on my snare drum, and then they finally get it in there, and it's like, okay, well now I need to add 2.5 inches to this of microphone cable. It's like, it's not going to work, right? So let's right angle that, and then you're good to go. And, so those kinds of things. And the ones that I've found, I'll see if I can find a link for them. They are adjustable in terms of the way that the connector, like I can rotate it 180 degrees. So the connector can be on the top or the bottom, or, whichever way I need it to turn. Some microphones, especially drum mics, the XLR port on the back of the mic, or the mic itself, won't rotate. It's not just like in a cradle or something. Yeah. It's on its own clip, and it is fixed. And so if my XLR adapter was to go the wrong way, it would be pointing up, so that's bad. So yeah, those kinds of things have been helpful. I probably shouldn't admit this because some guitar players that I play with listen to this show. Oops. But I keep a Sans amp. It's not a Sans amp. It's a Joyo. I bought like a $30. It's the amp simulator for an AC30, and I keep it in there so that if a guitar player's amp dies, the gig can go on.
Wow, that's good,
right?
Yeah.
I don't like them to know this. I mean, I don't want them to rely on it.
Right, and I mean, honestly, that's something they should carry. But if they don't,
correct.
It's a good thing that somebody is carrying.
I was trained by a very absent-minded guitarist in sort of the first major band that I was in, where we were playing like important gigs. Like this band was playing for 500 to 1,000 people. It was an original band. Like it was doing really well until of course the band just imploded, as they do. That band could have gone somewhere. But like all bands, it was on the verge of breaking up at all times, and it finally succeeded. But he would not bring picks to gigs. Yeah. And so finally, like after 2 gigs of this, where it was like we were in a panic mode trying to find him gigs, dude, there's 300-400 people out there that like bought our record and are here to see us. They know the words to our songs.
And you don't have any picks.
What is going on here? So I found out what kind of picks he used, and I bought a case of them, or a gross of them, I guess.
Right.
And I would keep them. The place I kept them, this is bizarre. Again, the things you think of. I drove a 1983 Mercury Grand Marquis because it was a big car with a frame. We were spending a lot of time on the highway, and I could fit my whole drum set and at least one or maybe 2 other people in the car with me. And but it was at the time even old, and the steering wheel was, it was about as thick as a razor blade, so it was super uncomfortable to hold.
Yeah.
So I had bought one of those cushy sort of steering wheel cover things that people don't use anymore because they started making steering wheels thicker because we all have the same human hands.
Right.
Yeah. And I would stick picks in that cover. Like, I don't know why this is where I decided that I was going to put them, but one time I must have been getting in the car and they were like falling out of my pocket. I'm like, well, I'll just shove them in here.
Yeah.
And so I would just keep that stocked with picks. And then I would take like 3 of them, and after he set up, I would look to see, did he bring picks? Obviously not. Yeah. And I would just throw like 3 of them on the ground in front of his amp. And he never like figured out that there was a pick fairy. He would always be like, really? He's like, oh, great. Oh, I found some of my picks. And it's like, yeah, okay.
Okay, so speaking of duct tape.
Yes.
How many times have you seen a guitar player without a pick make one out of duct tape to get through a gig?
I think only like twice.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think I've had it 4 or 5 times.
Wow. Well, you're a little older than me. I can get there. I can catch up.
Yeah, catch up. Yeah. But again, number 475,420 first use for duct tape is, because everybody's got it, right? And if you don't, you're not a real musician.
Yeah, duct tape. There are people that won't carry duct tape but will carry gaff tape. Yes, which is the expensive version of duct tape.
These are jazz players.
That's right. Or sound engineers turned musicians, or right, like, because gaff. The main difference between the two is that you can lift up gaff tape and it doesn't leave. Your feet won't stick to the ground after you pick it up, right?
Right.
Whereas duct tape, it's built to hold ducts together, like not the animals, the things in your attic, with your HVAC systems. And so the glue is meant to, persist.
Yeah.
Whereas gaff tape just sort of does its job and that's all. And it's, but it's way more expensive. Yeah. But yeah, everybody's got, I don't know that gaff would make as good of a guitar pick though. I don't know. Actually, it might make a better one. I don't know. I hope to never have to find out.
Well, I think that's a question for your listeners.
That's right.
Feedback
Gaff
versus...
Yes. Gaff versus duct tape. Feedback at giggabpodcast.com, folks. Yeah. All right. We have lots more to talk about, which really all that means is you have to come back sometime.
Oh, I would love to.
Amazing. Cool.
I love this. This is so much fun.
Same. I love it too.
Cool.
Where would you like people to find you? Or if you would not like people to find you, then I will happily field any questions or comments people have, and I'll send them to you.
If you want to hear any of my music stuff, I have a website, chrisbreen.com. Click the music tab, and I have some podcast themes that I've done. There's some YouTube videos of my band. There's some original stuff that I've done. Otherwise, I'm on Mastodon. I left Twitter a long time ago, but I'm on Mastodon, and that is
it's Body of Breen at mastodon.world. Believe it or not, typing in Chris Breen on Mastodon into Google search,
something happened.
It found you. So now it's in the show notes.
All right,
that's amazing.
There you go.
There you go. Thank you for hanging out. Thanks for hanging out, everybody. Thanks for hanging out, Chris. It's been a pleasure getting to chat with you, my friend.
For me, too.
Yeah, thanks for doing this. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
I didn't prep you on this, but are there 3 words of advice that you might want to give our listeners? If not, I have them. It's fine.
Can I do 4 words?
You can do 4 words.
Don't take it personally.
I like it. I like it. That's good. Always be performing, folks. We'll see you next week. And we're out. It's that easy.
That easy.
Yep.
This is fun.
I agree.